He believed his robe would shield him for all time. However, when Judge Boasberg began to protect political insiders, Pam Bondi completely upended the system. Pam Bondi positioned herself at the podium in Tallahassee, her hair neatly pulled back, her voice steady yet purposeful. She spoke without a script, no teleprompter or notes in sight, just a pile of sealed documents, her gaze fixed on every lens and journalist before her. This is not a matter of politics. This revolves around trust. And Judge Boasberg has shattered it. That was the line that ignited it all. It resonated through screens in homes, legal spaces, and meeting rooms. At first, it left people puzzled. A judge in the midst of criminal allegations. It seemed like a scene straight from a political thriller rather than the usual Tuesday morning news. Yet Bondi remained unyielding. Her voice pierced the cacophony of astonished whispers. Her lips remained uncurled. There was no necessity for her to do so. Only 48 hours prior, murmurs began to circulate within the Department of Justice. Whispers circulate regarding a confidential document, an internal evaluation, and a particularly delicate case assessment tied to Judge James Boasberg, a seasoned federal judge recognized more for his affiliations than his decisions. A figure that had flown under the radar for most Americans until now, yet Bondi had been keeping a close eye for months. The driving force? A late Friday ruling in a D.C. courtroom saw Judge Boasberg grant a restraining order, halting the deportation of 5 individuals believed to have connections to Trendy Aragua, a gang notorious enough to unsettle even the most seasoned ICE agents. Bondi felt it transcended mere poor judgment. She referred to it as a deliberate undermining of the judicial system. The manner in which the ruling was delivered added to the sting of the situation. Spoken in ambiguous terms, lacking any written directive for enforcement. Homeland Security, believing that the absence of a signed order granted them permission, proceeded with their actions. In a matter of hours, journalists gathered outside ICE field offices while demonstrators formed lines in front of federal buildings. Yet, in the shadows, an unseen fracture had occurred. Bondi reached out to the DHS leadership and the White House counsel on that very night. She reportedly claimed during a private conversation that he is shielding wrongdoers. He isn't providing an interpretation of the law. He's concealing himself behind it. That one call sparked a movement extending beyond the realm of politics. Unbeknownst to the public, Pam Bondi's team had been diligently assembling a comprehensive case file. This included discreet interviews with former clerks, internal memos from a whistleblower within the D.C. Circuit, and even encrypted message logs exchanged between Boasberg and former aides highlighted in a side-channel investigation. Bondi was not merely distressed, she was gearing up for battle. In her press statement, she refrained from revealing the complete list of charges, yet she emphasized that obstruction of justice was a significant consideration. Improper behavior in the workplace as well. She suggested a trend of decisions that strayed from established legal standards and significant national security matters. Those who tuned into the press conference found themselves grappling with a dual sense of astonishment, the content of her words and the realization that someone had finally dared to voice them. Cable news anchors stumbled over the urgent headlines. Legal experts rushed to clarify the implications. In legal chat groups nationwide, junior attorneys exchanged hushed inquiries, pondering the same question. Is this truly unfolding? Bondi had always been resilient, but this was an entirely different challenge. She was pursuing a sitting federal judge, and not merely with words. Her goal was to unravel his legacy piece by piece, word by word. In the days that ensued, her statements were analyzed across every channel. Critics labeled her actions as political retaliation, while her supporters hailed her as courageous for finally demanding accountability from the judiciary. The country was divided, yet one fact stood out: this was no mere publicity stunt. Bondi had a grave demeanor. She had released the pin. The detonation was merely commencing. What brought her to this moment? What makes Boasberg stand out? What is the reason for this moment? Long before the headlines and the accusations, James E. Boasberg was viewed as beyond reproach. A graduate of Georgetown and alum of Yale Law, equipped with impressive credentials and a network that extended from K Street to Capitol Hill. In the eyes of many within the legal realm, he was the individual you approached with caution, not out of fear, but due to his adeptness at navigating the intricacies of the system, at least on the surface. His ascent began in Washington, D.C. years ago. I began my journey as an associate judge in the D.C. Superior Court, subsequently advanced by President Obama to the U.S. District Court located in the District of Columbia. In 2020, he assumed the role of chief judge of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, a position that provided him with insight into some of the nation's most delicate national security issues. However, as time passed, his choices began to attract attention. It wasn't a single instance, it was a recurring theme. In Taiwan, when the FBI faced criticism for mistakes in its surveillance applications, Boasberg took on the task of reviewing the consequences. His decisions were carefully considered. Some might view them as cautious, while others perceived them as lacking strength. A gentle reprimand in one instance, a caution in another. Without consequences, there is no deterrent. Whispers among critics suggested that Boasberg had grown too cozy in his role, prioritizing the protection of institutions over the necessity of accountability. Pam Bondi stood out among the critics. She had been observing quietly as Boasberg's name repeatedly surfaced in matters that extended beyond the courtroom, particularly those related to immigration enforcement and the boundaries of executive authority. To Bondi, he was not merely issuing contentious decisions. He was crafting the battlefield from the sidelines. And then arrived the restraining order on the deportations. The decision was distinct. It wasn't merely ambiguous in a legal sense, it seemed deliberate. Bondi shared that sentiment with others. DHS officials were taken by surprise. One internal email stated, "We have no paperwork. Are we truly going to suspend flights over a remark made in passing by a judge?" Ultimately, the response was negative. The flights proceeded, and that was when Boasberg issued a threat of contempt proceedings. He charged the administration with flouting court orders, yet legal experts highlighted a significant issue. No written ruling could be enforced. In the shadows, Bondi's team seethed with anger. This was intentional. This constituted an obstruction. She approved an in-depth exploration of Boasberg's judicial background. Beyond mere rulings, there are case management notes, clerk memos, inconsistencies in scheduling, and personal communication patterns that reveal potential conflicts of interest. As they delved further, an oddity began to emerge. A peculiar quantity of undisclosed communications in matters related to encrypted technologies, specifically Signal. Signal transcended mere technology. It was turning into a complex web of legal challenges. In early 2024, a lawsuit surfaced, initially modest but growing in volume, alleging that senior officials from the Trump administration utilized Signal to orchestrate decisions on sensitive operations while avoiding any paper trail. When that case came to Boasberg's attention, it raised immediate concerns. Not due to any bias at that point, but rather because he had strong connections with several individuals mentioned in the discovery process. Nevertheless, he chose not to step aside. He retained the case and then discreetly moved hearings into private chambers, sealed the witness lists, and restricted press access. Bondi was far beyond mere irritation. She held a firm belief. She suspected that Boasberg had favored certain players in that case, either by concealing crucial evidence or postponing proceedings until the trail went cold. The Department of Justice began retrieving call records, issuing subpoenas for emails, and investigating timelines that were inconsistent. Gradually, a pattern began to emerge: postponements in hearings, absent filings, and mysterious alterations to access logs. What about Bondi's theory? Boasberg was advocating for individuals who wished to keep those messages hidden from public view. When the deportation order was issued, Bondi had already made up his mind about the direction this was heading. It was just a question of when she would reveal it to the world. Yet, it wasn't solely the strategic legal tactics that propelled her forward. An event unfolded in the background, something intimate. The space was tight, softly carpeted, and carried a subtle scent of printer toner mingled with coffee that had lingered on the burner for far too long. Within the walls of DOJ headquarters, located just off Constitution Avenue in D.C., Pam Bondi sat with a small group of senior advisors, arms crossed and jaw firmly set. The white noise machine outside the door emitted a steady hum, designed to ensure that conversations remained confidential. Yet, the unease within the room was palpable. "This is something we cannot overlook," she stated, her gaze fixed firmly on Deputy Counsel Arlen Stokes. Not any longer. On the table between them lay a folder, slender yet weighty, the sort of folder that possessed an inherent threat without the need for bulk. Only the ideal 3 or 4 sheets, impeccably timed. Within were selections from encrypted Signal conversations obtained via a discreet third-party subpoena. A person on the outskirts of the case had offered their cooperation. Instead of leaking it to the press, they delivered it directly to Bondi's office. And there it stood, A communication dispatched from a federal employee straight to Boasberg, 2 months prior to his assumption of the Signalgate case. The wording was ambiguous, yet revealing. It stated that they intend to dispose of a portion of it in late March. No need to fret, Jay. I've got everything handled on our side. Pam had gone through it twice, perhaps even 3 times, before she noticed her hands trembling. Stokes initially attempted to downplay the situation. It might be insignificant. There is potential for misunderstanding. Yet she remained oblivious to it. It's more than just this message, she remarked. It's all the layers built up behind it. The intricate designs, the omissions, the spoken directives lacking documentation, the proceedings concealed from public scrutiny. Everything feels excessively pristine. And then she delivered the line that signified a pivotal moment for her team. I refuse to allow this to be lost in a report from some inspector general 3 years down the line. That was the moment when everything changed. The following 72 hours unfolded in a flurry of activity. Preparation of legal documents, development of public relations strategies, and conducting internal briefings with the Office of Legal Counsel. They were keen to avoid any leaks. They sought to make a difference. However, what the audience remained unaware of was this. Just 2 days prior to the press conference, Bondi engaged in a phone conversation with a trusted confidant, an experienced federal judge in Phoenix who had been observing the Boasberg situation from afar. Leave out the politics and the headlines. Just a few years in the role and a subtle grasp of the dynamics of authority. Are you really certain about this, Pam? The judge inquired. I exist. You'll sever many connections. I'm not here to build connections, she responded. I'm here to tidy up. Her words lacked any trace of anger. She expressed it with precision. She was aware of the potential political and personal toll this decision might take on her. Yet she was acutely aware of the price she would pay if she chose to turn her back now, for this had transcended mere legal principles. Earlier that year, a mother from Corpus Christi penned a letter to Bondi. Her son, working as a border agent, suffered severe injuries during a failed operation that involved 2 individuals believed to have connections to Trent d'Aragois. They had managed to evade processing due to a court-ordered hold. The court order that bears Boasberg's signature. The mother expressed, we can no longer act as if politics are devoid of tangible effects in the real world. My son's spine is fractured. He is unable to walk. And the individual accountable is being protected by a judge who remains hidden from view. Pam remembered that letter. It was tucked away in her desk. When people later claimed she made it personal, they weren't completely off the mark. It was intimate, yet not driven by malice, but rather by obligation. Once she went public, naming Judge James Boasberg and confirming an open investigation, there was no turning back. She was completely committed. Everything, her reputation, her position, her credibility, now hinges on the result of this case. However, as the narrative unfolded, another layer started to emerge, revealing that Signalgate encompassed much more than mere messages. It was about the figures concealed in the shadows. The audience quickly embraced the name. Signalgate surged onto the internet with unstoppable force, and in just a few days it spread like wildfire. Television discussions, audio shows, online forums. It had evolved beyond merely being a messaging app. It revolved around the individuals involved, the secrets they were concealing, and the reasons behind Judge Boasberg's attempts to obscure it with procedural complexities. The narrative delves deeper than many comprehend. Signal had been around in Washington, yet its ascent during the Trump administration raised concerns among specific factions within the intelligence community. Staff members, legal assistants, and even high-ranking officials had started employing it in meetings, asserting that it was intended to minimize leaks. However, Signal automatically removes messages. In the realm of governance, this presents an issue. In the realm of governance, the importance of records cannot be overstated. The original lawsuit centered around that issue. A small watchdog group from San Diego filed it, and initially most people dismissed it with laughter. However, as internal documents started to emerge, documents revealing scheduling conflicts, erased calendar entries, and significant documentation gaps, questions began to arise. Next arrived the names. More than mere support staff, authentic identities, previous national security advisors, an undersecretary of defense, and even an individual who had previously collaborated directly with Boasberg as a legal consultant during the examination of surveillance protocols. Yet, in the midst of it all, Boasberg remained committed to the case. He chose not to step aside. He failed to recognize the links during the proceedings. He arranged a pretrial hearing, restricted access to the public, and released a concise statement regarding the ongoing procedural evaluations. That was the moment Bondi's team reached the end of their tether. The encrypted logs from Signal servers were subpoenaed. A challenging endeavor, approached with great care. However, a legal filter linked to national security was in play, and the DOJ advocated for it vigorously. Their return wasn't thorough, yet it sufficed. A particular message from Octorm Braden caught my attention. It was a matter involving a legal assistant on the lawsuit and a former staff member from the Department of Justice who had previously served under Boasberg. The note stated, "JB mentioned we'll conceal it during pretrial. Stay calm. No files are released to the public unless compelled to do so." 3 days later, Boasberg decided to postpone the discovery phase. Legally speaking, that could encompass a myriad of interpretations. Judges frequently postpone discovery proceedings. However, when combined with the message, it resembled a strategic chess maneuver, a proactive barrier. Pam Bondi did not observe a prudent judge. She observed a guardian, one shielding individuals on either side of the path from having their words, their motives, and their misdeeds exposed to the light. And she understood that the more he lingered on that bench, the chillier the path would become. She summoned her legal strategy team for a late-night meeting. Immediate action is essential. The opportunity is fleeting. This matter remains locked away for eternity, with the public left in complete ignorance. One advisor, with a hint of reluctance, inquired, "Do you believe he orchestrated a cover-up?" She remarked that she believed he was aware of who would be chosen. It seems he made a deliberate choice regarding his allegiances. The phrase "chose his loyalties" would later be cited in the Wall Street Journal, The Hill, and even NPR. It transformed into a subtle rallying call for those who viewed Bondi's campaign not as an act of vengeance, but as a struggle to reclaim authority over the judicial process from the unseen manipulators. It was unsettling how effortlessly this had all been concealed. A respected judge with decades of service skillfully navigated the complexities of court actions related to a scandal that carried significant national security implications, employing tactics of delay, redirection, and obscurity. With each step Bondi took, resistance trailed closely behind.